doctor.
During pregnancy, an unborn baby's health is largely dependent on their mothers. Living a balanced lifestyle and using supplements like Ciplaton Preg for additional folic acid and vitamin B6 during pregnancy gives your child an essential head start. After a healthy birth, your baby's developmental progress becomes a concern.
There's no doubt that parents worry more about the physical milestones, and the reason is you can see them. And, you can see when your baby walks, and you can compare it very easily from your baby to another baby or from two siblings. Whereas your emotional milestones are much more subtle. So what often happens is that we'll have a mum who's very focused on when does her baby talk, when does her baby walk, and that type of thing. And so she's stimulating her baby a lot in order to get those physical milestones. But what can happen along the way is while she's focusing very heavily on that, she's ignoring the fact that her baby needs downtime and needs sleep and needs to be able to learn to self-soothe, which is a developmental milestone that a lot of people don't even think about.
With regards to speech development, Rebecca's only saying 2 words and she's almost 18 months and I'm a tiny bit worried about it.
You know what, Natalie? It's actually fine. Basically, speech is one of those milestones that is very, very variable. So you can have a little one who's speaking like 8 or 9 words on their first birthday and another little one who, like yours, is only doing 2 words at this age. What happens between now and 2 years old is that she is understanding probably a lot more than she is saying. And then between now and 2 years old, she'll have what we call a language explosion, where literally her language will just start spilling out of her mouth.
My daughter, she's 22 months now, and we were like a little bit worried about her speech because we speak 2 different languages, and for a long time she didn't speak 1 word, so we worry about this.
It's actually really an awesome thing that you've done, because you've started off with communicating with her in your mother tongue, in both of you in your mother tongue. So having done all the right stuff to this point, it's now time to narrow it down to 1 language for a couple of months, and you'll probably find within the next 2-3 months you'll have a language explosion, she'll take off in English, and then you must go back to speaking to her in both languages, because it's great to be multilingual.
Growing up in a 2 or 3 language home actually happens very often, particularly in our South African context. We have children that are growing up either with parents who are both speaking 1 language and a nanny who's speaking another language to them, or a mum and dad who are from 2 different cultures. What's very interesting, and there's been a couple of different pieces of research, is that babies who have a natural capacity for language will actually learn both languages. They'll learn moms, they'll learn dads, they'll learn the nannies, and they'll learn them all at around the same time. Maybe a little bit of a delay, but essentially they end up with 2 or 3 languages, which is a great advantage in life. The problem is that sometimes you'll get a mum, and this particularly happens when mums are coming from cultures where her mother tongue was a language that isn't spoken internationally, and that mum says, you know what, I want my baby to speak English because this is the universal language, or whatever it is. And what ends up happening is the mum doesn't speak her mother tongue to her child, and so the mum is having to think before she speaks. And what we find on an emotional level is that the mum doesn't carry the same level of emotion when she's speaking her second language. So we actually always say to mums, speak in your mother tongue, because that's a language in which you coochie-coo your baby and you nurture them and you love them, and that carries a huge amount of emotional tone, which is very, very important. Well, stimulation groups, it's an interesting thing. The first thing I'd like to say is that if you don't have the opportunity to join a stimulation group because you're a working mum or because you don't have the money to join them because they're expensive, don't take on the guilt. Don't even worry about it, because just being with your baby and just stimulating them and just being alive in our world is absolutely fine for your baby. But let's say you've got the opportunity to join one of these groups. Let's have a look at the value of them. Well, I do think they hold value. They hold value firstly for the mum, just because being a mum at home can be very, very lonely. So actually getting out and into a group where there are other mums can be an absolutely wonderful experience, and you can make some of the best friends of your life in those early days with your baby. So yes, get out, but realize that a lot of the value is actually just for you, all right? So that means that if your baby is sick or tired or cranky that day or starts to cry halfway through the group, don't push it. You can take your baby home.
With my son, I started from 6 months old, and I loved it because it was my first baby. I could meet lots of moms, and I could see he grew in the developments almost every week. He loved being part of the music, and he loved getting involved in the fine motor things. And so now, having a second child, I thought I'd better sign her up. It is a bit delayed now because she's 16 months, but she's really enjoying it.
Overstimulation at an early age has its dangers. Megan discourages the use of walking rings and babies watching television. playtime should be kept simple.
A very interesting question that often comes up is, my baby hasn't crawled, is this an issue? Now, crawling is a milestone that we like to encourage, as opposed to the common ones that you think of sitting and walking. What crawling does is it gets your baby down on the ground, they bear weight through their hands, so it builds up their muscles in their fingers and their shoulders, and it also helps them to get into little spaces, under a swing, in between a slide, all of those type of things. So you start to really get a spatial awareness of your world through crawling. But it doesn't have to happen very early. If it happens later, like towards 10, 11 months of age, it's fine, as long as the baby does crawl. The warning signs are definitely something that we do need to focus on and highlight. If a baby isn't smiling by 8 weeks of age, I would be worried. So babies need to smile, they need to make eye contact, and they need to be interacting at 8 weeks of age. But I must preface this whole conversation by saying that if your baby was prem, you need to adjust for dates. So in other words, if your baby was 2 weeks early, then it won't be 8 weeks that you'll be worrying about it, it'll be 10 weeks, because you must know that you must take it from the date your baby would have been born. Okay, and that's important. The other thing that I would worry about is that if the baby's missing a whole lot of milestones, let's say they did smile at 6 weeks, but then they didn't roll at all, they only sat at let's say 8 months, and they're not crawling or walking by the time they're a year old, that's when we start to see a global trend. So it's not just one particular milestone, it's a number of milestones. Then I'd worry about that. If the baby doesn't have any words by 2 years of age, I would worry about that as well. So those are kind of the three major things that I'd worry about. Not smiling early on or making eye contact, I would worry about that. I would worry about global delay, so just a pattern that's developing, that you can see developing, and I would worry about language if it isn't there by 2 years of age.
Once your baby has completed these important milestones around age 3, your child should be independent, have the ability to remain calm when stimulated, and interact with people. Cipla will make it.
Hello, doctor.